Well, welcome back to Artist Talk with LVA. My name is Keith Waits. The show is produced by Louisville Visual Art, and I talk to artists. And I'm talking to an artist, but today we're going to be talking to this artist in a sort of a different identity. It is Fagiola, an interdisciplinary artist exploring desire, power, and fetish in their work. Farrell's practice engages industrial materials, processes, and spaces as refractions of physical and implied structures of power on the body. Their sculptural objects, installations, and performances fantasize bodily possibilities through erotic rituals and material transformations. I mean, that sounds great. They are now the studio manager at the Kentucky College of Art and Design, and as a part of their role there, they are making their debut as a curator with a new exhibit. And you know what? I was going to say it, but Farrell, you say it, so I don't say it incorrectly.
Yeah, the title of the exhibition is Solve et Coagula.
Solve et Coagula.
Yeah.
So I was going to say like Solva.
You could put a little flair, a little.
Yeah, that'd be wrong. Well, so I've been to your studio, I've seen your work, and we can talk about that a little bit later. But first, let's focus on the exhibit, which opens this Friday, February 10th. It was delayed by the terrible windstorms that took 80,000 people's power out last Friday, but it's now it's opening this Friday at the 849 Gallery, which is a Kentucky Art and Craft. The reception is what time?
Wait, not Kentucky Art and Craft, Kentucky College of Art and Design, and the reception or KYCAD, and the reception is from 5 to 7 p.m.
Okay.
Yes.
My apologies, KYCAD. I was just talking to somebody whose work is in KMAC, so still not out of my head all the way. So what's this? What is this exhibit? We'll translate the title and then tell us what the concept of the exhibit is and how you came to make that a reality.
Okay, so the title Solve et Coagula is Latin, and it means dissolve and reform, and it's a motto of alchemy. And it's also what a motto of the Baphomet. I don't know if you're familiar with that figure that's often used to represent the Satanic Church, but it's sort of a magical symbol as well of alchemy.
I'm not exactly sure, but as soon as you say that it was that symbol for the Satanic Church, I believe I know what you're talking about.
Yes, yeah. So the exhibition is part of a series of exhibitions at KYCAD that's inspired by the curriculum there. So this particular exhibition is related to a class taught by Andrew Cousins, which was a class on mold making and casting. And as part of this class, they partnered with Falls Art Foundry, where the students cast some bronze artworks. And so then I was asked to curate this exhibition because I use casting as part of my artistic practice a lot, and it's a process that's very dear to me and special to me. And I'm fortunate to know a lot of artists working with a lot of really incredible artists working with casting, and so that's how it came to be that I curated this exhibition.
So is all the work cast metal?
All of the work, well, so no, it is all of the work in this exhibition has to do with mold making and casting, but it is not all cast metal. Maybe primarily focused on that, but there are a variety of materials in the exhibition.
Okay. Well, tell me something about who's in it.
Well, okay, so for this exhibition, I was thinking of artists as alchemists. So all of the artists in the exhibition, they're not, I was trying to find artists who were not just using the process of casting as a means to an end, but as a purposeful and transformative action in the making of their work and as a way to generate meaning in their work. So these are artists that are using casting in a way that, adds meaning to their work. And I can list off the artists that are in the exhibition.
Sure.
Okay. So in the exhibition, There's a few local artists as well as some regional artists and an artist from LA. So local artists include Ed Hamilton, Joyce Ogden, Andrew Marsh, and James Wade, who's in Lexington, Kentucky. And then Gwen Yen Chu, Richard Hunt, and Fatima are all Chicago artists. And then Karen Lofgren is an artist in Los Angeles, California.
Okay. Now, did you just to look to the artist that the work comes the farthest? Did you know that artist, have a relationship with them, or did you just kind of find their work and was taken by it?
All of these artists, yeah, I do know them personally. I did just meet Ed Hamilton recently, but he's a very well-known Louisville artist. But everyone else, yeah, I did. I've worked with in various ways in the past or knew.
When you talk about this idea of the casting itself as a process, having meaning, talk about that, because I haven't seen the exhibit yet. It will open Friday, but I imagine pieces that came through a casting process. But if I'm not particularly savvy about things, I might not understand that one piece is cast and one piece is not. So when you talk about how that process impacts them, does that read in the art? Is it somehow something that does come through beyond any other subject matter?
I think it does. And in the pieces that I chose, I would say most of them that's very apparent. And I'm showing work that's not necessarily what you would think in the traditional sense. They're not all sculptural objects. Mm-hmm. There's even a video in a video of a performance in the exhibition. And so casting is also a form of performance, or it can be a performative process. And some of the objects in the exhibition are sort of like ritual relics or artifacts from performances, either private or public, that the artists did.
So were those performances usually involving the casting process, like you mentioned that? And I know that you and your partner Andrew talk about that with your studio, that people come and I haven't had a chance to do that yet. You had to cancel the last time, I think, but you know, that you do that. But is that where that work's coming from? Similar kind of approach to combining performance with casting?
Yes. So yeah, so the video that's in the exhibition is actually a video that Andrew Marsh and I made together. I filmed it, and it's primarily of one of his iron casting performances where he pours molten iron into molds that are carved out of wood. Mm-hmm. And when you pour molten iron into wood, it creates a sort of explosive reaction, and it's a really beautiful, with lots of sparks and little droplets of iron kind of flying everywhere, and a lot of fire. So that's that's a method of performance for Andrew. Yeah, and it usually takes a crew of people to do that. So sometimes I'm part of that, but in the video, there's also several other local artists that are in that video as well, performing with him.
Okay. Yeah. To work as a curator, I mean, when you say that you know most of the artists, that's not unusual. And people that curate all the time, it's just a part of the job to kind of visit artists, studios, talk to artists, kind of be up on what they're doing. So it's not that they're necessarily like good personal friends with all those artists, but you have a relationship with artists that you choose for a show. I think that's a common thing. I curate, and that's usually true. But when you go through this process of the curatorial process with these artists, did you make stronger relationships with them? Did you get to know them better because you were involved in choosing this work? I mean, what's the interaction? I'm assuming it's not just like, hey, I like that, can you send it, right? What's the interaction and the dialogue like?
Well, so I like I said, I'm really fortunate to know these artists, and the way that I know a few of these artists in the exhibition is through casting with them, which is that can be a real bond building process to make art with somebody alongside someone and have them help you make your art. And so there's a lot of, in that sense, I was like really good friends with them and we know a lot about each other's practices and what we're working through in our artwork. But yeah, I did, give me a chance to, like, for example, Ed Hamilton, I did not know him previously, and I was familiar with his public artwork, which is what he's really known for, which is usually in cast bronze, very realistic figures and monuments. But in this exhibition, his personal work is in there, which is very different from his public artwork. So I did get to, get to know his work on a personal level, which I didn't have access to before.
He's a charmer too.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, he's a very charming guy, very sweet guy.
Well, and I always say, I think he comes from a generation that still, and I think this is still true, thinks that, when you hit the big time or when you get a reputation, whatever, you go to New York or some other kind of location, and he's always stayed in Louisville. And I've always been very grateful for that. And I think now, of course, we live in a world where you could be an artist and live almost anywhere and still have a meaningful relationship to art communities and show, exhibit, curate. The world's a much smaller place because of tools like what we're using right now. This is maybe this is a rude question to ask before a show opens, but how happy are you with it? How satisfied are you with the results of what's going to be in the gallery?
I'm really happy. I'm really happy with it. Yeah. And I'm really honored to be able to show some of the artists that I'm showing. One thing that I'm kind of proud of is that between all of the artists, there's an age range of about 60 years. So these are artists that it includes emerging artists, mid-career artists, late career artists. Richard Hunt is in the exhibition, and I'm really honored to show his work. He's a pretty well-known Chicago sculptor, and he is in his late 80s. And he's had an incredible career. And then so yeah, I'm really honored to be able to show those people alongside each other, these different generations of artists. But yeah, I'm very happy with it.
Well, and I didn't expect you to say, I wished I could have done more.
Yeah.
I mean, especially not before, but it's nice to know that it is gratifying. Were you stressed? Were you worried until whatever the last week or so? Were things going to come together? Was everything going to get there on time? Was it challenging in that way that it sort of pushed you?
Yeah, definitely. I didn't have I had a very short amount of time to get all the works, about a month to get everything together and install it. From the time that I found out that I would be curating the exhibition. So yeah, that's not very long at all. So it was stressful, but it all came together. Yeah, I think it came together really well.
Well, this is where having those relationships really comes through for you, that you know people you can turn to and approach and do that with. It's
yeah.
That's a short turnaround. That is a short turnaround. So not that I wouldn't think it'll be impressive anyway, but that'll just kind of that's kind of the icing on the cake, that if it's a really great exhibit, it's yeah, it was done in a month.
Yeah.
Does it give you the taste for doing a lot more curatorial work?
I've always wanted to try curating. I think definitely first and foremost, I'm an artist. And so this curatorial project, I am coming at from an artist perspective. And I think I will curate again in the future, but I'm also really anxious to get back in the studio and work on my own work. Yeah.
Let's talk about your work a little bit. So the last time I saw stuff, you had an exhibit a year more ago at Carbon Copy, Shohei Katayama's space. Was that about the right time frame, I think?
Yes, it actually closed about 1 year ago in March, beginning of March. Yeah.
And it was filled with very, very large pieces. That his space, he has a very large entrance on an uphill incline, but still I can imagine the kind of work you do is not easy just to put in any gallery. Like it has to have the space, it has to have the access. Because you do very large metal sculptures. Casting is involved. How would you describe your work? I mean, I read your introduction a little bit, but how would you describe your work right now? Is it different from what I saw a year ago, or are you still in that same sort of uh epic scale uh space?
I mean, it's not that big. Okay, there's some like decent sized pieces in a gallery setting. Maybe it's big work. But yeah, that's a big portion or a body of my work is involves sort of these steel sort of machine like armatures or frames, and then I'm hanging or sort of weaving these rubber skins through them.
Mhm.
And I also do like other things like small scale castings and other types of work, but I still am working with steel, and I'm really trying to push the rubber part of my work now and almost think of it like painting.
Mhm.
So I'm painting with rubber and making these really big hanging forms.
Interesting. Well, I'm curious to see it. I remember you had one piece that you showed me when I visited the studio space, which I will only describe it enough for you to understand which one I'm talking about, but it seemed to be a female form that was sort of laying back, like they were on their elbows.
Oh yeah, that may have been in the Joy with Sharp Edges
Yes,
exhibition
it was. But
show.
I don't know if you were finished when I saw it in the studio. You might have still been tinkering with it, but
Maybe, yeah. Yeah, that piece is cast iron. So that was a cast piece.
it was a
And
very interesting sort of mix of representational but abstracted. I mean, it was clearly a human form, but it was also not a naturalistic human form. And it seemed to be saying something, making a commentary.
yeah, I mean, so I guess all my work is um figurative in a way, even if it's a very abstract way, it's always referencing the body. So even these steel structures that I make, I feel like they're very symmetrical and they're referencing limbs or parts of the body. That piece is, yeah, it's a sort an abstracted figurative piece. It was sort of inspired by like brutalist architecture and monuments and supposed to look kind of like cast concrete. Um, yeah. And the reference images were images of pornography. So it's this woman with her legs spread and her back arched, and she's just kind of just displaying her genitalia to the world.
Right. But is that now is I think you come by your medium and your approach to the medium, and I should say like the brutalist sort of quality, honestly. But it also strikes me is that if that were a more naturalistic sculpture, it could be controversial. I mean, I don't know. It's like it's that kind of thing that can push certain kind of buttons in people. But the brutalist, almost abstract nature of it gives it a certain remove. Like you can look at it in any way you want to look at it, but you don't get uncomfortable about it. You get captivated by it. It seems like.
Yeah, that's one way to look at it. I mean, I've been told some people interpret that piece as like something is being inflicted upon the figure
Mhm.
in the piece, like they're being like it's a violent piece, like they're being hurt in some way. And other people interpret that piece as the figure being this really sort of unwielding or unyielding sort of powerful figure, just like here I am with her legs spread and display. So people interpret that piece in like weird, different conflicting ways. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm very fond of saying that no art is complete until you have the viewer, right? Because the viewer brings that last 10%. And so, and that you can take, I think whenever abstraction is involved, even as just an aspect, you can line 10 people up and they're all going to give you maybe a different reaction looking at the same piece at the same time about how it makes them feel or what they think is on your mind or whatever. But you know, the other pieces too that were much larger, they do seem like machines, and the skins add to this, but they're like machines that sort of follow how we know machines to work, but don't quite. Like they sort of have, they look like they can function, but they also, and I guess this was what you're talking about when you're talking about the sort of the some of the brutalist of human form, was that those machines look like almost like they were human anatomy that's been pushed into a machine form sometimes. Now, is that crazy or off base?
No, yeah, I definitely am thinking that way. Like the machines, they don't function. They function and actually function insofar as they can like erect themselves, like the big, tall, heavy petting machine piece that was in that exhibition. It actually stands itself up. I mean, well, with human help, but like it pivots so that it can stand itself up. But it doesn't actually like, it's not a machine that is kinetic or really functions
Right.
in any way to produce anything.
No motor or anything.
Yeah, exactly. It just kind of looks like it's made to look like it could, and it's made to reference a variety of different machines that we might encounter.
But then that also gets into the thing where you talk about something that's like it's almost like an artifact. It's also not a machine that was made today. It's a machine that looks like it could have been made ages ago, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's funny. I mean, some people at the exhibition came up to me and asked me like, oh, where did you get that? You know, like, where did you, they thought that the whole thing was sort of a found object, you know, like I found it at a junkyard or something, but it's just constructed out of reclaimed steel. So
Have you ever thought about, you know, maybe that's a conceit, like if you had a show and you did kind of present them as sort of found objects, just to sort of, you know what I mean? Just like, I mean, I think it's valid. I mean, I'm not in favor of an artist being dishonest about their work, but playing with the audience's perception of the work could be an interesting part of an exhibit.
yeah, that could be interesting. I think I usually just like let people speak and, you know, just kind of go along with it, however they, I mean, that's really all that matters. Well, not all that matters, but, you know, the way that the exhibition is experienced by the viewers is that's going to be their, what matters to them. So if they think, or if that's how they interpret it, then I think that's really interesting. I don't know. Yeah.
I'm often interested too. It seems like there's a little bit, and I don't mean to be dismissive, and perhaps a little bit ignorant of how many women might be. I know there's a lot of women sculptors, but how many women are doing this kind of work, these kind of epic scale pieces that are steel? They seem in a way traditionally very masculine, you know, based on what art history has for us. Do you ever have that sort of reaction to that they somehow seem that it's maybe anachronistic for you to be doing that kind of work?
Um, Not really, to be honest. I mean, like I do get that a
Well,
lot. It always it always surprises me still because I feel like there is a lineage and history of women doing this, you know, of women sculptors and artists working with steel and making big steel structures for a while now. So I don't consider myself a pioneer in any sense with that process.
I'm just portraying my ignorance.
That's okay. I mean, it's
Know
not.
that history better than I do. But but I do think just to not to like try to explain myself too much, but I do think identity, gender identity, racial identity, all sorts of different things are a part of artists' work now. You know, that I think it used to be that what your identity was in any of those aspects was immaterial. The work is the work. But I think there are a lot of people now that really want to be seen like, I am a Black woman artist, and I want that to be a part of your understanding when you approach my work. Or I am a trans artist, and I want that to, like that it does sometimes now become a part of that. those identities are more pushing more to the forefront, I think. And that might not last a long time, but it reminds me of something Ed Hamilton once said. I said, I was the first time I interviewed him on the show, and I said, so probably the most important, and I started to say, well, I was going to say black artists from Louisville, but really one of the most important artists from Louisville ever. And he said, yeah, when are they going to take that word black out of my name and just let me be an important artist? Like, don't define me, because it always suggests, right? Like important woman artists, like that, to be an important woman artist is not quite as being an important as being an important male artist, or to be a black artist is not as important as being a white male artist. And to be it's like it used to be that way, that the language always was a way of qualifying your status or how somebody was reading your work. And so I don't mean to perpetuate that, but I'm always fascinated with how identity is factoring into artists. And it isn't sometimes. Some people, I'm going to feel like what you're saying is not so much for you, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, I definitely think, of course, identity politics is a huge part of the way that we interpret and maybe even classify artists currently in current discourse. But I kind of do resist that. I mean, of course, my work is in many ways personal and political, and it's tied to my identity, but I'm always reluctant, because I feel like some people do look at the work that I make and they don't look beyond, or, they observe that I'm a woman making steel sculpture, like large scale steel sculpture. And they think that is the statement, like that the statement begins and ends at that point. And there's more to my work than just the fact that I'm like a woman that is making steel sculpture. I don't know, to me, there's
no. And I think that's absolutely fair. And I sometimes worry when people are pushing an identity out there, is like, you're giving too many cues or signifiers to the viewer. Whereas let the work speak for itself, and then have somebody discover, like, oh, this is a woman, this is a black woman, this is a black woman who lives in another country, this is whatever, kind of things that you learn about the artist afterwards. You should learn afterwards.
Yeah.
Let the work speak for itself. That seems fair.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's about time to wrap it up. Farrell, thank you so much for talking. Always a pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
Let's see. So Solve at Coagula.
Beautiful. Yes. Perfect.
No, I didn't get it right.
No,
You're just kind. But that's the exhibit, and it opens at KYCAD, the 849 Gallery on 3rd Street, with a reception this Friday, the March 10th, 5 to 7 p.m. And then it's up through how long? Till
the end of the month. So it'll close on March 31st.
Okay. As far as you know, you're not curating the next exhibit, right?
As far as I know, no one's asked me to do that yet, but.
And not surprising you with that. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for Farrell Fagiola so much for joining me today.
Yeah. Thank you, Keith.
Okay.